So good evening dear students, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. Today is 23rd October 2024 and today we have some important articles for the discussion, and one by one we'll try to discuss all these important articles. So till yesterday we have discussed 2024 mains question papers and we have analyzed and we have understood all those questions. From today onwards we'll try to discuss important news articles which are covered in different newspapers. So this discussion will particularly helps you, or certainly helps you further enrich your preparation, because we are going to discuss most important topics in this session every day, and along with the news analysis we are also going to discuss one previous year prelims question, and also we'll try to discuss the mains questions as well, so based on the current events which are covered in different newspapers. So without any further delay, let's start our discussion. And before discussing this, so yes, I have one prelims practice question. The question is, which organization is responsible for allocating deep sea mining permits? So there are different organizations and these organizations govern deep sea mining, and particularly there is a convention. So the convention, I hope you all knew about this convention, which is known as UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on Law of Seas. And if you know about this convention, you can correctly answer this question. This is also a very simple and easy question, and if you have a basic understanding and basic knowledge about this United Nations Convention on Law of Seas, you can correctly answer this question. And the options are International Maritime Organization, International Seabed Authority, United Nations Environment Program, and option D, United Nations Security Council. So this is a very easy question. Try to answer this question in the comment section, and correct answer will be providing you in tomorrow's class. And I hope you knew about India's efforts of deep sea mining, and in fact India has also launched a program called Samudrayan. So similar to Gaganyaan, Samudrayan aimed at exploring maritime resources across the seas in Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal, and even Arabian Sea as well, right? So this Samudrayan, there was a vessel called Matsya 6000. So the Matsya 6000, a deep sea mining vessel that would be used for conducting research on deep sea mining, right? So try to answer this question. And the first article with which we are starting this discussion is about unemployment problem in India. So we all knew that there are different types of unemployment. For example, frictional unemployment, structural unemployment, disguised unemployment. So there are different varieties, different types of unemployment in India. We see a lot of unemployment, right? So despite India being one of the fastest growing major economy in the world, so India is not able to create large scale employment, and in fact India's growth is very often dubbed as growth with unemployment, because India's economic growth not able to create large scale employment opportunities. Now one reason for this, despite 1991 economic reforms, these reforms are also known as LPG reforms, India opened up its economy for foreign investment, and India also largely opened different sectors for the privatization despite 1991 economic reforms. So unemployment rates were not declined, or even unemployment rates further increased. One reason for that is a lot of investments will come in service sector in India. So in fact investment or infrastructure development has not resulted in employment creation in the industry, because 1991 reforms mostly focused on the service sector alone. So this was one reason that we have jobless growth. So this is a term which is known as jobless growth. So in India now what we see jobless growth. So jobless growth is because of service sector is one reason, and most of the industries or most of the sectors that we have been focusing on are labor, so not labor intensive, we can say that the capital intensive as well as technology intensive industries. technology intensive industries. So instead of instead of capital intensive and technological intensive industries, we should try to create labor intensive industries. So labor intensive industries have a lot of potential to create employment opportunities. For example, when we talk about labor intensive industries, MSMEs have a huge potential of creating employment opportunities, so across different regions, and it would also create employment opportunities for the women as well. For example, leather, footwear, textile manufacturing. So all these sectors are known as the labor intensive sectors. Rather, 1991, after 1991 economic reforms, what has happened? So investments were made in capital intensive as well as technological intensive industries, so they are less labor intensive sectors, and because of that reason, unemployment levels have been substantially increasing in India. And apart from that, another major reason is lack of skills. So lack of skills is another reason which results in higher levels of unemployment. And in fact, outdated curricula in Indian Indian education system is also another major reason. So students lack the job relevant or industry relevant skills. So industry relevant skills are very, very important for these these students getting immediately employed. So all these factors have been leading to the unemployment problem in India, and this unemployment crisis further leads to state legitimacy, or it undermines state legitimacy. How? We'll try to understand this. Now, we all knew that India has been facing significant challenge in terms of creating jobs, right? So the state is not able to create gainful employment opportunities, whether in the private sector or in the public sector. And in fact, the quality jobs or a gainful employment opportunity for everyone provide dignity, adequate compensation, and also opportunities for the advancement, opportunities for the betterment, and in fact, it improves the standard of living of people. Standard of living, right? So standard of living, when I say this, it provides an opportunity for the people to come out of the chronic cycle of poverty. It improves the living standards of the people, and it also ensures that the healthcare and education needs of the family can be met, and it also provide social security for the people who are employed. So there are quite lot of benefits because of the employment opportunities. So despite a low reported unemployment rate, so there is a huge unemployment rate. You can see this in image. So according to NSSO data, so there is a huge level of unemployment, right? So despite a low reported unemployment rate, the reality is that many jobs are informal and they lack stability. Particularly, they are affecting the youth as well, right? So since the inability of the state to create large scale employment opportunities has been impacting the youth, and it has been undermining the legitimacy of the state as well. And in fact, when we talk about a good quality job, so whenever someone is employed, so how we can categorize, how we measure any employment as a quality job? So it would be characterized by living a dignified life. So job is very often associated with the dignity. Under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, it also recognizes right to life or right to live with dignity as part of Article 21 of the Constitution, and sufficient pay and opportunities for learning and also career advancement. So these are the characteristics, or the basic features of the quality job. However, so in fact, many jobs in India are often considered as unpaid jobs, informal jobs, or they lead to dead ends failing to meet these criteria. So most of the jobs in India are created in unorganized or informal sector, right? So they are being created in the informal sector, and since in India around 90% of the employment is engaged in the unorganized sector or informal sector. So we cannot say that the informal sector would be able to ensure dignified life for the people. It ensures sufficient pay, it ensures social security, it provides social safety nets, and it also provides the career advancement options for the employees, right? So in fact, very often people who have been engaged in the informal sector, they lack job security as well. they lack job security, they lack income security, so they lack the social safety nets, right? So they also lack the social safety nets such as pensions, so provident fund, etc., and health insurance. All these facilities would not be provided to the informal sector, and since many of India's employees are engaged in the informal sector, they are deprived of all these benefits, and they are also vulnerable to many challenges that they could face, and they cannot live a dignified life with sufficient pay. So secondly, as I have told you that in India around 85 to 90% of the employees are engaged in the informal sector. So the informal sector engagement of employed, so that gives our understanding of the unemployment, because we do not have adequate data about the informal sector, because generally it is considered that as individuals may only need to report working for 1 month in a year to be considered employment. So that's how it is considered as a skewed understanding of people who are engaged in the informal sector. So this representation of people who are engaged in the informal or unorganized sector generally masks the underlying job quality crisis, right? So the ultimate goal and objective of the government to ensure that people who are willing to work, who have the required the educational qualifications and skill set, so they need to be provided quality jobs, right? So when we talk about the quality jobs, so quality jobs should meet the criteria of dignified life, sufficient pay, opportunities for learning, as well as career advancement as well. And in fact, in India, the problem is lack of quality jobs. This is one of the main problem that the Indian economy has been facing. So for example, a lot of people who are passing out from colleges across different parts of the country, but they are not able to get the employment opportunities. So what are the reasons for that? So they lack the industry relevant skills. So industry relevant skills. So when they lack industry relevant skills, of course industries are not ready to engage these college passed out students in their respective industries. So that is one of the main problem, and this further threatening the economic stability, right? So economic stability is being strengthened, and apart from economic stability, it further undermines the credibility or legitimacy of the state as well. So if avenues for participation are not created, avenues for the participation of the young people in the workforce are not created, frustration among young youth will likely escalate. And in fact, there are, for example, terrorism, drug abuse, and increased crime rate, and brain drain. So all these are problems when the government is not able to provide adequate employment opportunities for the young people on time, right? So in fact, the political challenges actually lies in providing citizens with dignity. So in fact, the elected representatives, the governments are not able to provide people with good quality jobs, because good quality jobs ensure dignified life for the individual and the sense of purpose, and also the financial support for the families as well as people who are engaged in these quality jobs. So that is one political challenge as of now. And in fact, the political engagement as well as the traditional community have been overshadowed by the liberalism. These are ideologies, as well as capitalism. So liberalism and capitalism are two ideologies which are very popular, very famous in the Western world, and due to globalization, both liberalism and capitalism also spread to the third world countries, particularly in the global south, and this led to a new way of exploitation of the people. So therefore, both liberalism and capitalism making work the primary means for the social status of the people. And in fact, very often if we look at these societies, the society is stratified into the well-off sections, the poorer sections, and in fact these well-off sections are known as the elite sections, and these elite sections very often benefit from the societal control. And while large segment of population faces the problem of lack of dignity as well as financial security as well, and in fact the growing disparity between different classes and different sections of population further exacerbated by the technological advancements. So imagine that most of the people are engaged in the informal or unorganized sector, but on the other hand the other section which is illiterate, financially well off, and they took the benefits of globalization, and due to the further technological advancements this disparities have been further growing, and this could potentially lead to the political instability in the country as well. So that has to be kept in mind. So we all knew that. So globalization, do you think that globalization has benefited people who are uneducated, people who are illiterate, people who have engaged in the unorganized informal sector, and even it has not benefited the agriculture sector? So globalization has mostly benefited people who are educated, people who are engaged in the service sector. So therefore certainly it will lead to, over a period of time, the political instability as well. So when the growth benefits are not equitably distributed across different sections, and current political responses from the government, political parties and political representatives generally oscillate between market reliance as well as short-term partisanship. So a superficial approach, like a concept of creative destruction, that overlooks the deeper issues of job loss as well as social inequality. Now here a term called creative destruction. Now what does the term creative destruction actually means? And in fact creative destruction generally means new innovations, new technological advancements. So those are replacing the older ones, and in fact they can destroy the existing economic structure and also pave the way for new ones. Now for example, imagine that there is a new technological advancement or new innovation, so that was brought in, and in fact this new innovation positioned to replace the existing innovation. So in that case, what about people who are their lives are dependent on the old technologies, right? So they need to immediately switch over to the new skill set to adopt themselves to these new technologies. That is known as the creative destruction, and it's a concept that often used to describe the dynamic nature of the modern economy and is generally seen as a positive evolutionary process in the economic growth and development of any country. However, the creative destruction very often overlooks the deeper issues of job loss as well as the social inequality, particularly in countries like India. And in fact, there were proposals within India about universal basic income, introduction of universal basic income. So in fact it is said that universal basic income may perpetuate inequality, and it could also diminish the human dignity as well, by implying that many people are no longer needed in the economy. Now what does this universal basic income means? So universal basic income generally means that people will be identified who are considered as below poverty line, and every year a certain sum of money will be transferred into their bank accounts as a responsibility by the government. So don't you think that it will perpetuate inequality, and it would also diminish human dignity as well, right? So it would in fact disincentivize people who wanted to work. So therefore this approach fails to engage individuals in meaningful work, and that also risks fostering resentment as well. So you can also go through the pros and cons of universal basic income. And in fact there are a lot of political parties and the political representative. So those political parties must prioritize addressing certain structural issues. There are a lot of structural issues. So instead of making electoral gains, these political parties and the political representatives should think about addressing these structural issues, particularly the problem of unemployment and inequality, rather than merely focusing on the electoral gains by these political parties. And in this context, a robust social contract is essential for restoring faith in the democracy. Now, how any political party or the government at large can create large scale employment opportunities. I hope all of you knew about this. So skill development is very important, particularly the industry relevant skills. Industry relevant skills are very important. And secondly, revival or growth of MSME sector. So this is also one sector which could create large scale employment opportunities, because it has a lot of potential. And further promoting or encouraging entrepreneurship. So this is also very important to create large scale employment opportunities. And also attracting private investment. So particularly private investment facilitation, particularly foreign direct investment, so in labor intensive sectors, right? So you should not forget about these labor intensive sectors, because labor intensive sectors have a lot of potential to create large scale employment opportunities: leather, textiles, apparel, so all those sectors. And we should also not forget the potential of agriculture sector, right? So agriculture also has a large scale potential of creating employment, particularly women, right? So feminization of agriculture, so women can get a huge employment opportunities by agriculture sector. So these are the areas that the government should focus on to create large scale employment opportunities. And in fact, political leaders should tackle these issues, so all these challenges head on, and avoid deflecting the responsibility. So they should not run away from the responsibility. They need to take the responsibility, and they should create large scale employment opportunities. Otherwise it could create a large scale instability in the country, social instability, economic instability in the country. And in fact, India is one of the largest functional democracy in the world. So the future of Indian democracy hinges on fostering a sense of public purpose and also ensuring economic participation of all citizens in India, right? So that's how this editorial is being given by the author, right? So the next editorial, which is from the Indian Express, so it talks about India-China border deal or border tensions at large, right? So we'll discuss about this. So India-China border deal at line of actual control. So we'll try to understand a brief background about this. So the brief background is that so both India and China have the competing claims over the Aksai Chin region. For example, so we all knew that this is the Aksai Chin region. Okay, so Aksai Chin region. So both India and China have the competing claims over the Aksai Chin region. And apart from Aksai Chin region, so these countries also have the competing claims over the Arunachal Pradesh as well, right? So Arunachal Pradesh, and apart from Arunachal Pradesh, so this is Bhutan, and this region is known as Chumbi Valley, or it is known as Doklam Tri-Junction area. So Doklam Tri-Junction area is strategically very, very important, because this is the place where Chicken Neck Corridor is located, and Chicken Neck Corridor is strategically a very important area for India. And in recent times, China has been deploying a large number of People's Liberation Army forces into the line of actual control and started border incursions into the Indian side. So China in recent times become more and more aggressive at the line of actual control, and that has resulted in Doklam standoff, right? So I hope you knew about this Doklam standoff between India and Chinese military forces, as well as the Galwan clashes. So this happened in the year 2017, and this happened in the year 2020. So since then, the border tensions between these two countries are continuing, right? So in fact, both India, China, along with other member countries of the BRICS grouping, recently attended BRICS meeting at a place called Kazan in Russia. Right, so this is a place called Kazan in Russia, and these countries have attended. And in fact, Russia has hinted at a possible agreement between India and China in resolving the border issue. Right, there will be an agreement resolving this conflict between India and China at the border. So we are going to discuss about this, right? So in fact, in this article, the author has been discussing that China has already confirmed an agreement to resolve the border crisis between India and China, and in fact it is a 4-year-old military standoff for China with India. And this particular development between India and China will be followed by a series of tensions, and this follows a series of tensions which began in April 2020. And in fact, here the author has been saying that these tensions between India and China began in the year 2020, but they were from 2017 itself, from the Doklam standoff times. So it began in April 2020 when China transgressed along the line of actual control, culminating violent clashes between these two countries, right? So since April 2020, so tensions between both India and China have further escalated, right? So both countries have started confronting with each other at the line of actual control, particularly at a place called Galwan Valley, and China's military incursions, and that leading to India's counter deployment along the LAC. So one thing that we need to understand, in recent times China started deploying more number of forces across the line of actual control. So the situation further intensified following 2020 Galwan clashes. So that has resulted in death of around 20 Indian soldiers. So despite a lot of efforts or attempts to disengage at 5 friction points, so mistrust has persisted regarding China's intentions to revert a pre-2020 troop positions. And in fact, the diplomatic engagement was severely limited since the clashes affecting overall bilateral relations between India and China. Okay, so if we talk about this in a very, very detailed manner, so as I have told you that there were Galwan clashes in April 2020, and that has led to the death of around 20 Indian soldiers. So after this incident, tensions further escalated between India and China. So China aggressively started border incursions onto the Indian side of the line of actual control, and in order to counter Chinese aggressive incursions onto the Indian side of LAC, so India also started counter deployment of Indian forces, right? Counter deployment of Indian forces into the other side of the line of actual control. And this situation, because both countries comes to head on head, so therefore the situation further intensified following June 2020 Galwan clashes, and that has resulted in the death of around 20 Indian soldiers as well. And in fact, despite all these attempts to disengage at 5 friction points. Now what are these 5 friction points? So there are certain friction points where Indian and the Chinese People's Liberation Army soldiers engaged face to face, right? So India deployed its security forces, and China has also deployed its security forces, and Chinese forces started incursions into the LAC, and Indian soldiers pushed back. And these are the friction areas where the troop deployment is at maximum. These are 5 friction points. Okay, so there were a lot of attempts from Indian side and Chinese side also to some extent to disengage these 5 friction points, and mistrust has persisted regarding the China's intentions to revert to 2020 troop positions. And in fact, China is not interested to achieve the status quo ante. Now in fact, India very often asking for the status quo ante from China, but China is reluctant to do so. So what does this status quo ante? So before 2020, what was the position of China with respect to troop deployment? And India very often asked for this level of troop deployment from China. So And in fact, diplomatic engagements between India and China was furtherly severely limited since the clashes affecting the overall bilateral relations. And in fact, clashes between India and China not just impacted the military relations between India and China, the security ties between these two countries, but over a period of time, these clashes spread to many other areas of engagement or bilateral relations between India and China. And in fact, the trade relations between India and China remain strong. And in fact, when we talk about trade, so we have trade deficit with China, a huge trade deficit with China. And in fact, there are also attempts to reduce this huge trade deficit from China by preventing the unnecessary imports from those countries by imposing certain duties, countervailing duties or anti-dumping duties, or a few other ways. And apart from that, there are other areas also which are impacted by the border tensions between India and China. Those other areas including investments from China. Okay, so investments from China, because predatory investments policy, so predatory takeover of Indian companies by Chinese companies during the COVID-19 pandemic. So investment has also got hit by the bilateral relations, and travel, visa arrangements, and all these different areas saw a significant setbacks. And in fact, the decoupling of Indian industries dependence on Chinese economy further spread to various sectors, and that has been highlighting broader implications of the military standoff. So therefore, China has further agreed to restore troop positions to pre-2020 levels. So it wanted to restore troop positions to the pre-2020 levels, and verification of this particular claim is crucial. So as part of agreement between India and China over line of actual control, so China has agreed to restore the troops position. China will reduce the deployment or number of deployed troops into the line of actual control. However, this claim of China needs to be verified. It is very important because it could signify a positive shift on the part of China when it comes to improving bilateral relations if implemented in a proper way. And apart from that, there is also an agreement on patrolling arrangements, right? So both countries security forces regularly do patrolling across line of actual control. So so they do patrolling across line of actual control, and there is also an arrangement on patrolling arrangements. So that was announced just before the BRICS summit in Russia. So remember that I have told you that in Kazan, Russia, so there was a BRICS meeting where both Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well as Chinese President Xi Jinping will meet bilaterally to discuss various issues of bilateral relations. So therefore, providing a platform for possible high-level interaction between Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well as President Xi Jinping for the first time since 2020, right? So after 2020, there was no major meeting where Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping met together. So the Indian government must ensure that there will be a transparent communication regarding next steps to foster trust. So there is a lack of trust, and there is also lack of confidence between these two countries. So the trust deficit which is prevalent between these two countries must be bridged. Right, so how can these two countries bridge the trust deficit? So through the bilateral engagement, so high level bilateral engagement between Prime Minister and Chinese President. So apart from bilateral engagement at the higher level, it is also very important that the agreement should be implemented by China, should be implemented by China in letter and spirit. So that is also very, very important to build this trust deficit. And in fact, there is also a lot of demand from the Indian industry to allow Chinese investments into India. Chinese investment and raw material from China, and also Indian industry demanding visas for Chinese nationals to come, and so because a lot of those economic interests are involved, so there is such a demand. So in order to improve bilateral relations, there is also a need to first resolve these border tensions. And in fact, China time and again has been emphasizing that the border tensions which are existing between India and China should be seen independent of the bilateral relations. But on the other hand, India has been continuously insisting that India will not see these border tensions independent of the bilateral relations between India and China, and that is one of the bone of contention between these two countries. And in fact, Indian government earlier refused to fully brief parliament or even allow media to access, has further fueled skepticism about the existing situation across line of actual control, because the government clearly refused to brief the parliament about the situation which is prevalent across line of actual control, and the government also not tried to brief the media about the situation. So there is a clear demonstration of troop withdrawals are necessary to validate the claims of progress. So otherwise it would be remain seen as the border tensions still prevailing. And in fact so in fact it is also held that the Chinese incursions into the Indian side are true, and Indian government has not been doing enough to push back these Chinese incursions out of line of actual control. And apart from that, it is also very important for the government to avoid any premature declaration of success similar to those following 2017 Doklam disengagement. So as I've told you that there was a crisis, a standoff at a place called Doklam Tri-Junction between India, China and Bhutan. So at this time also Indian government announced a premature success of withdrawal of troops, but actually in ground it is not true. So which saw a subsequent increase in Chinese military presence, and in this context a cautious and a measured response is advised. And in fact, both nations, both India and China, need to evaluate the relevance of 1993 Border Peace and Tranquility Agreement. So both these countries have signed Border Peace and Tranquility Agreement, and in fact in the year 2013 also they have signed Border Defense Cooperation Agreement. So there are a wide range of discussions. So these discussions are necessary to establish a framework for managing border differences moving forward, and this agreement should also be implemented in letter and spirit, so that will help further improve relations between both India and China as well. So the next very important article is that India has it is said that India recently launched its 4th nuclear submarine with advanced arms. Now it is not yet made public by the government or Indian Navy, but it is held that already India have 3 nuclear powered submarines, but recently India has also launched the 4th nuclear submarine. Okay, so if we get into this article, so India's 4th nuclear powered ballistic submarine, so it is also known as SSBN, referred to as YES-4, right? So it is also referred to as YES-4. So the nuclear powered ballistic missile submarine, so that was launched into water at the shipbuilding center in Visakhapatnam last week. And this particular submarine, YES-4, is bigger and more capable of the first nuclear powered submarine, which is INS Arihant. Okay, now INS Arihant is first nuclear powered submarine, so that was built indigenously. And in fact, India currently has 2 nuclear powered submarines which are operational. One is INS Arihant, was quietly commissioned into service in August 2016, and second this submarine, nuclear powered ballistic submarine, so which is INS Arigat, which is also known as S3, was commissioned the end of August this year. And in fact, the third nuclear powered ballistic submarine, which is also known as Aridman S4, is currently undergoing sea trials and is expected to be commissioned into service next year, or very next year. So IS intercontinental ballistic submarine INS Aridaman will also be commissioned into service next year. So INS Arihant is presently armed with 75 kilometer range K-15 SLBM, and S4, the nuclear powered submarine, the fourth nuclear powered submarine, S4, this star carries the advanced 3500 kilometer range SLBM K4. So that was tested for the first time in the year 2020. So this ballistic missile K4 will be mainstay of India's undersea nuclear deterrence, because as it provides a standoff capability, and in fact it can also launch nuclear weapons while submerged in Indian waters till a 5000 kilometer range. So this ballistic missile is developed and fielded as well. So when we talk about this, India already achieved this nuclear triad, right? So I hope you knew about this nuclear triad. What does it mean when we say nuclear triad? So nuclear triad means India could actually launch nuclear weapons from land, air, as well as water. So that capability is known as nuclear triad. So India already achieved this nuclear triad capability. So we have several missiles, so through which we could launch these nuclear weapons across different countries. For example, Prithvi 2, Agni 1, Agni 2, Agni 3, Agni 5. Those missiles by inducted by the Strategic Forces Command, and there is also air vector as well as sea vector as well. So what is the difference between diesel electric submarines, nuclear powered attack submarines, as well as nuclear powered ballistic submarines? So we need to understand the difference between these three different types of submarines. Now when we talk about the nuclear powered ballistic submarines, so these are a slow moving bomber and a stealthy launch platform for nuclear weapons. So in fact these submarines can launch nuclear weapons. The Arihant and three more these nuclear powered ballistic submarines under construction. So the part of the Strategic Forces Command. So remember, these are very important. You may get a prelims question about these things. Okay, so diesel electric submarines. So diesel electric submarines use electric motors, and these electric motors are very often charged by diesel engines to for a movement of these submarines. And these engines require air and even fuel to operate, which means they need to resurface more frequently, making them easier to detect. And in fact, these diesel electric submarines, 4 are Shishumar class, which were brought and then built in India in collaboration with Germans starting in 1980s, and 8 diesel submarines are Kilo class or Sindhu Ghosh class. So they were brought from Russia, including erstwhile USSR, between 1984 to 2000, and 4 are Kalvari class, which are built in India at Mojgaon Dock Limited. Secondly, nuclear powered submarines. So these nuclear powered submarines can stay and operate underwater for almost an indefinite period of time, and their endurance is limited only by food supplies. So right, so their endurance to remain underwater for longer period of time can be limited only by food supplies for the crew. So they are also equipped with a range of tactical weapons such as torpedoes, anti-ship cruise missiles, and even land attack cruise missiles. And in fact, India is among 6 nations to have these nuclear powered attack submarines, such as US, UK, Russia, France, China already have these nuclear powered attack missiles. So Chakra 3 currently being refitted at Russian shipyard, and it will be inducted in the year 2026. So you have already understood about nuclear powered ballistic submarines, but the difference between all these three different types of submarines is very, very important, right? So the next important article is about the change in the rules, or change in amendment to the Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissue Act of 1994 to meet the cornea demand. Okay, so we'll understand about this. The cornea is a top layer of our eye, and in fact it is very important, and there is a growing demand for cornea because of different eye diseases. And through the amendment to Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues Act of 1994, so India being able to meet 50% of cornea requirement. So how India being able to meet 50% of cornea requirement, we'll see, right? So Ministry of Health and Family Welfare may amend Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues Act 1994 to facilitate retrieval of cornea. For example, this is an eye of human eye, right? So the top layer of the human eye would be cornea, to facilitate the retrieval of cornea from Indian patients who die in hospitals without the consent of the family, right? So the amended rules empowers the government to retrieve cornea from the patients who die in hospitals across different parts of India by the government, right? So why the government has amended these rules, we'll try to understand this. The Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues Act, which is also known as TOTA Act of 1994, and in fact this particular legislation provides regulation of removal, storage and even transplantation of human organs and tissues for therapeutic purposes and for the prevention of commercial dealings in human organ tissues, right? So this legislation deal with all these different things. And National Organ Transplantation Program that was launched to further promote and enhance the organ transplantation across different patients for different diseases. It to establish a network of organ and tissue transplant organizations at different levels, at national level, regional level and even state level. And in fact this National Organ Transplant Program will link them with transplant and retrieval hospitals and tissue banks to maintain a national registry of organ tissue donors, recipients for the purpose to provide an efficient system for the procurement and even distribution of organs, tissues from undeceased donors. So I'll make it a very, very simple, that there is a legislation which talks about the regulation of removal, storage and transplantation of human organs, and National Organ Transplant Program was launched by the Union Government. Organ Transplant Program has been launched by the Union Government. Now what this National Organ Transplant Program will do, it will establish a network of organ and tissue transplant organization, right? So a network of organ and tissue transplantation organization. So these organizations will be established at the national level, and they will be established at the regional level, and also they will be established at the state level as well, right? So in fact the National Organ Transplantation Program, so once it establishes a proper network, so apart from establishing this network, so what it will do, so it will link them with the it will link national and regional as well as a state level organizations with transplant and retrieval hospitals. So there are certain transplant as well as retrieval hospitals, so it will link these organizations with transplant and retrieval hospitals will be linked with national, state and regional level organizations and tissue banks. And to maintain, there will be a national registry as well, National Registry of Organ Transplantation, about donors, recipients. So all these details will be registered in National Registry, and this National Registry will be managed by National Organ Transplantation Program, right? So that will over a period of time ensure efficient system for the procurement and distribution of organs and tissues from the deceased donors. So once these organs and tissues are procured, and they will be transferred to the eligible donors as well. Under this program, support will be provided to establish to upgrade the existing organ and tissue transplant and even retrieval facilities, and to establish the tissue banks as well. So what is the news? The news is that in the backdrop of a huge demand which is existing for cornea donation, with the country being able to meet only 50% of the requirement of cornea, now what the government has done, a new initiative of amending these rules, or the existing rules. This will allow retrieval of cornea from the deceased patients without the consent of the family. The government or the hospitals can retrieve the cornea from the patients who die in hospitals without the consent of the family. So this means that every person who is dying in a hospital would be presumed to be cornea donor, right? So a cornea will be connected from those donors. And in fact, Director General Health Safety suggested that self-declaration could be enough, and presumed consent with opt-out system may be worked out for boosting cornea donation in India. So in order to meet the 50% demand for cornea, the rules were amended. And in fact, in order to boost the cornea donation, DGHS also suggested that self-declaration could be enough, and presumed consent with opt-out system may be worked out for boosting cornea donation. So in order to implement this new initiative, it was decided to direct medical colleges, hospitals in the country that all postgraduate trainees, resident doctors, medical officers working in these eye departments, they must be given compulsory training in cornea or eye retrieval as well. So therefore, such retrieval and donation will help in meeting excess demand for the cornea. And in fact, training of technicians in cornea or eye retrieval would be instituted by governments in states as well as union territories as per the guidelines prescribed under Eye Bank Standards of India 2020 as well. Now, what is cornea? So when we talk about cornea is, you can see this is cornea. So cornea is the transparent front part of the eye. So it is a very transparent, it is front part of the eye. So that covers iris, pupil as well as anterior chamber, along with interior chamber as well as lens. The cornea refracts light, accounting for approximately 2/3 of eye's total optical power. In humans, this refractive power of the cornea is approximately 43 diopters. And cornea is smooth as well as clear like a glass, but it is strong and durable. Therefore, it helps the eye in two ways. So firstly, it shields the rest of the eye from germs, dust and other harmful matter. Cornea shares this protective task with eyelids, the eye socket, tears and sclera, white part of the eye. And cornea in fact acts as eye's outermost lens, and it functions like a window that controls and focuses the entry of light into the eye. So the cornea also contributes to 65 to 75% of the eye's total focusing power. So that is the importance of cornea, and these 2 points are also very, very important for your prelims examination, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. If you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.